Hi, this is Anthony, and I have another installment of All Heart Can Hold. This is Chapter 22, World War II and Other Emotional Catastrophes. Orange, New Jersey, Liberty Street, July 8th, 1944. Joe knew he was going to come back. That's what he told his folks when he got this draft notice in the mail to report to the local induction center. That was step one. And where the boys whose numbers came up went to be reviewed by teams of doctors, psychologists, and other experts. They had to be deemed physically and mentally fit for service, eyesight, all that. If you weren't, they classified you as 4F. Now, he was not 4F. He was classified 1A, scored high on the IQ tests, maybe even high enough for an intelligence assignment. He was Italian. Italians weren't trusted with that type of work during World War II. Nor were many German Americans. At least they weren't thrown into government-run concentration camps like the Japanese Americans were. Joe was another comedian with a quick wit and very pleasant disposition. Handsome. The girls thought he was a dreamboat in the 1940s language. Maybe that was why. Mike and Rocco, two other sons, were already in Europe. Richard, the youngest, vowed he was going to enlist the day he graduated from high school. That was 8 months away. He made good on that vow, signed on with the Marines the very day he graduated. He was sent to the hell in the Pacific. It was going on there, and he survived and lived the longest of his group. He died in January 2013. Her oldest son, Jim, was 4F. His eyes, even wearing glasses, got him a pass. It was an embarrassment to him, but he had a wife and 3 children, so also a relief. News from Europe and then the Pacific was horrific. Thousands were being ground up like sausage meat by this war, civilians and military alike. It had been 34 years since she had been home. 34 years ago since she had left the Valley of the Roses in Foligio province in Italia. As fate often has her way, she ended up in another valley. She had a beautiful rose garden in her backyard, a real source of joy as well as pride for her. She went to church every day, lit candles to Mary, Mother of God, and prayed the rosary daily for all the boys, not just hers. Joe had been inducted July 23rd, 1943, graduated from 4th Infantry Training Brigade at Fort Wheeler, Georgia. Then was posted to Fort Meade, Maryland, awaiting his deployment. They came in January 1944. On June 6, 1944, otherwise known as D-Day, in Normandy, France, on Omaha beachhead, he was killed in the line of duty. He was 18. Ironically, on that very same day, Private Joe Franchino was killed. Private Joe Sarno was also among the initial landing parties. Same Joe Sarno I would know as an old man, him being an old man, whom my aunt and everyone else hated, but whom I loved. The contraption they had set these boys into land on the beach were little more than death traps. The orders were to go out and forward, in formation, head for cover, and return enemy fire. Private Joe Franchino obeyed orders. Private Joe Sarno said, fuck a bunch of that shit. He didn't obey orders. He did what he needed to do to survive. He observed as soon as the front gates of these landing crafts, quote unquote, went down, all Nazi machine gun fire was directed there, cutting the men up into pieces. The packs each sold or carried were immense, heavy, and overloaded. What was inside was of little use if you just had your head blown off by a German machine gun. So he made his way to the back of the vehicle, and the first thing he did was he dumped his pack, disobeying orders to stay in formation. Joe Sarno says. He was going over the side. As they landed, sure enough, Private Joe Franchino and Company, obeying orders, were shredded into tiny pieces as they walked headlong into their deaths and left more blood on the sand-soaked shores of Europe already again. Private Joe Sarno disobeyed all orders. He climbed up and he went over the top and he said, what the, his sergeant said, what the fuck are you doing? These were the last words out of his sergeant's mouth as his head literally exploded right off of his shoulders from one round of heavy machine gun fire. Holy shit, he screamed to no one there because everyone was now dead around him. He got over the top and into the water, which was sickening. Blood, body parts, brains, guts, eyes, half corpses, headless corpses, legless corpses, armless corpses, corpses everywhere. Just every kind of course, direct, rapid, heavy machine gun fire can artistically create, using a living human being as its canvas, bullets as brush, and blood and gore as paint. He used all the dead as shields and made it to the beach. Crawling as slowly as possible and moving from body to body, which were still taking enemy fire. He gathered supplies, a 45 here, a grenade there, finally scored a Tommy gun and an extra drum of ammo. There was a place where the corpses ended in no man's land. He wasn't the only guy who thought about this plan of survival, so now what? The German position that was within eyesight, the one that was intensely focused on this part of the beach, was still a solid 100 yards away, with nothing in between to offer cover, other than some of the Germans' own contraptions to inhibit the march forward. So he laid there and he pretended to be dead. Another soldier, a boy like him, about 10 feet from him, also made it this far. They're men, but they're 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. The noises were deafening. Gunfire, explosions, screams. They signaled to one another very carefully to crawl as slowly as possible. They would crawl while the machine gun nest was blasting away. This meant they weren't being watched, they hoped. Inch by inch, slowly they got to the ridge right under the machine gun nest. It felt like hours had gone by. Together and in unison, they both carefully stood up against the end of that small cleft. Each took out 2 grenades, pulled both pins, and 4 grenades were thrown, one after the other. 2 landed on and in the target. Boom, boom, the nest went silent. Climbing up, they both shot into the pillbox to ensure all were dead inside. This was just the beginning of many bad days. The only thing that would ever rival that period in his life was far in the future and involved living with my aunt for 20 years. In other words, he told me World War II was easier to live through and survive than my aunt, and that comes up in other chapters. She's passed away now, and now the truth is going to be told. On July 8th, 1944, the Department of War's telegram was delivered to 549 Liberty Street, Orange, New Jersey, to a Mrs. Rosario Franchino, mother of the fallen hero, Private Joseph Franchino. Joe Sarno told me all of his war stories the year he died. He had never told anyone else. He had told me. But that was a long time ago, 55 years to be precise. It took the War Department a month back then for the notifications to come via Western Union telegram. So many were being killed. There were thousands being killed monthly. Telegrams were efficient to get any news across. Even the death of your 19-year-old son, many of them 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old sons were killed. Older men too. The death of their sons entitled the bereaved mothers to household to display a gold star in the War Mother's flag. The War Mother's war flag. The mother's war flag. Sorry. Until that day, her flag had 4 blue stars, meaning she had 4 sons serving in the war for the United States of America. The gold star was an irony, a bright, beautiful color that symbolized, in this case, the darkness of death, of never seeing that beloved boy again, all the potential they had snuffed out, All the years they might have lived, gone, washed away soon enough as years. Then decades passed. Then eventually all that was left were statues and monuments, books and movies, and TV shows that followed that war. Private Joe Fokina was wrong. He wouldn't be back. Those that survived, that came back, the broken-minded, soldiers such as my Uncle Mike, he bore his anguish in silence. And he lived day to day, never missed a day's work. He died a premature death at age 60. While eating breakfast at the same diner as he had for the past 30 years, he grabbed his chest while eating, fell off the round spinning red stool that diners have for counter service to sit on. He was dead before he hit the floor, a massive heart attack. August 1986, Orange, New Jersey. Private Michael Francino's war was finally over. War takes its casualties at different times and in different ways for each man. Some die fast deaths on the battlefield. Others die long, lingering deaths. The type of malingering death that our beloved Uncle Mike suffered. And millions like him all around the world. Then there were men like Joe Sarno, Uncle Dick, Uncle Rocco. They never spoke about the war. They hated watching us kids play Army, inspired by the post-war TV shows and what I now consider propaganda. It made all the wars seem so glorious, fun, and exciting. As children, we soaked it up. G.I. Joe dolls were my favorite toy. And toy soldiers, too. Private Rocco Francino, U.S. Army Chemical Corps of Engineers, post-war house painter. Beloved husband and father to an adopted son, whom he named Joe in honor of his younger brother. Deceased 1977, liver cancer, his war finally over. These men lived and they went about their lives. Some were more successful about it than others. Joe Sarno, he came back and was recruited by the mob, the mafia, La Cosa Nostra, our thing, whatever you want to call it. He married 7 times. My aunt was his last wife, but she was common law. They didn't have a wedding certificate, but they lived together for, I think, 25 years. Yeah. And as I said, of his 7 wives, she was the most challenging of all those women. I was there in her home, late January 2000. Sergeant Joe Sarno, war hero, mafioso, undertaker, gambler, smoker, drinker, salesman, father, grandfather, lover, and poet, died of emphysema at the age of 75. His war finally over. Richard Francino, Major, retired, U.S. Marines, Reserve, U.S. Air Force. Chief of the Orange, New Jersey Fire Department, post-war. Retired, State of New Jersey OSHA Inspector. Faithful husband, devoted father, beloved uncle and son of the American dream. Died in a Florida hospital of a heart attack, January 2013, age 86. His war was finally over. The Blue War's mother flag, the Blue War Mother's flag, with 3 blue stars and 1 gold star that my family had, it's been lost in the dustbins of history, like everyone else's. I'm going to finish up with part 2, which is just a little bit longer, a little bit shorter than this. Thank you. I'll be right back. End of part 1.